something a little new. Well, I guess it's not new because I've been putting together a lot of terrain recently. So I ordered from Blacksite Studios the Sundered Empire kit. The now this is made for Relic Blade, but it is pretty much any fantasy, and there is a lot here to unpack. And let me tell you, I am super excited. As I was putting this together, this is probably the most fun I've had putting a kit together because it was so simple. But let me tell you something. These sheets, thick, very nice MDF, very thick MDF, very solid. And I had not a single piece break when I was popping it out of the sheets. Now, this is how you don't want to do it, just so you know. So that was just my first test, just to see if I could get it out of there. But what you want to do is just take an X-Acto knife and just cut the sprue points. And there's only usually 1 or 2 on each piece. So you're not really going to have any issues. Now, the only thing that I came up with initially was some of the sheets were kind of stuck together. But luckily, it didn't really do any damage to the pieces themselves to pull them apart. It just kind of... there were a couple of pieces on the sprue itself where things got kind of, chipped out. There's 1 or 2 places here and there, but I'm going to show you how to fix that real easy. So, putting these things together, this is the large piece that goes, it's like kind of a centerpiece. It looks like a platform or the bottom of a building maybe. Putting these things together was quick and easy. The instructions are clear and concise. As of my recording this audio, they actually are going to rework the last page because there are some inconsistencies on there that I found that need to be fixed. So this is just a regular build with just Elmer's glue, nothing crazy. And as with the Warcradle kits that I've put together, there are several layers to a lot of these. For instance, the building here, this little platform, or the big platform, there is an inner layer and an outer layer, and there's also a grate that goes across it. So there's multiple layers to this stuff. And I really like the way that looks. It looks more than just a flat piece. It looks, it is actually 3D. There's more to it than just one little piece, that you glue to another. And I really appreciate that about these kits. I don't know what took me so long to order from Blacksite Studios, but honestly, having put together the Warcradle stuff, and you'll see here how nice the cuts are on these. You can pop out every single of these little filler pieces without any issues. I had no problems getting any of the pieces off the sprue. Now, as I did with my previous kits, as you can see here, I put a little bit of PVA into the corners and kind of pushed it down with the applicator, with the nozzle, just to reinforce the insides of these large buildings, because that's where these buildings are going to be the ones that are going to be supporting most of the weight. And with these outer walls, of course, I put a little bit of glue on the inside. You don't want to put a whole lot because it will squish out of the corners if you overdo it. And again, on the places where I had a little too much glue, I would either just wipe it off with a finger or use a slightly moist brush to wick that up and spread it around a little bit. Now, as you can see, this... I actually had no issues putting this together as opposed to other big kits that I've put together and big buildings that I've put together. This terrain is very well thought out, very well built, very well tooled, and it is cut perfectly. The Warcradle kits that I've been working with, some of the pieces don't really want to come off of the sprue very easily, and some of them are very, very small. I recently had to throw away a bunch of fences from Warcradle because the pieces were too small to come off the sprue, and even with an X-Acto knife, I couldn't get them off without breaking them. All of this stuff, however, every bit of it came off of the sprue without breaking. Even the pieces where I was trying to see if I could, bend things, and I wasn't necessarily trying to strong arm it, because if you strong arm it, obviously it's going to break. But I did try and push a few pieces off, as you saw, without using the X-Acto knife, and I wasn't able to necessarily destroy anything flat out, which is good. That's a good thing. Now, like I said, I wasn't really trying to destroy anything. I was just doing what some people might do and try and, push something out of the sprue without doing it properly. Anyway, I'm going to let you watch me put some buildings together here, and I'll be back in just a moment. All right, so moving on to the bridges. I don't know why, but this particular set, these pieces are, this is what I was kind of looking forward to. I don't know what it is about having a broken old ramshackle bridge to snipe from with an archer, but I really like the idea. This piece, it was somewhat fiddly at first, but then I realized those end caps, you can put those on afterward. You don't have to put them on and balance them out. That was just me, doing my thing, being, trying to be a little more difficult than it had to be. Now on these pieces, I did have to shave just a little bit off of the bridge caps, the floor pieces, but not much. And it was just as simple as taking the X-Acto knife, shaving it a little bit, and then slotting it in. Plain and simple, really easy. I really like the look of these bridge pieces. I really like the way that they function. I like the way that they slot together, and they look really great on the table. And you can, with these, as you can see on the the cover image that they provide, you can put the wooden bridges or the wooden scaffolding across each of these bridges to make a full bridge if you want. And it looks really ramshackle and really good. And I really hope at some point that I can get some Mordheim action together on this table. Hopefully I can do that soon. Anyway, so here's me putting together some bridges, and let me tell you, it was awesome compared to some of the other stuff I put together recently. So moving on to the Watchtower. This piece is probably my second favorite after the big platforms and buildings and the bridge. I like the layers that go into this thing. It's not just a piece of wood and a stone floor. It actually has several layers of walls that go on the bottom as well, which is kind of neat. I really like it. So this one was, again, also easy to put together. As you can see, everything slots together just fine. With this, you definitely want to be careful when you're putting it together, and when you're pushing everything in, these scaffolding pieces are kind of delicate. Now, I did use the rubber band method to keep everything tight together like I usually do, but I was very careful about how much pressure I was putting on everything. And with the wall sections here, what I did is I kind of measured out where they would sit, and then I put the glue on afterward just to kind of make sure that I wasn't putting on too much glue. Now, there are actually 2 layers worth of walls on this, and in the end, it looks really cool. So after I was done with that section of walls, I took the rubber band off and I started putting the next section on. And the next section, it's the one that's more damaged, a lot more ramshackle. There was one piece there, if you see that far left piece, that was a little wobbly, but I think that was because of the way that I pulled it off of the sprue. As long as you're careful, you're not going to have any issues with it. And as you can see, the rubber band method of keeping things together really helps to keep everything solid as it's drying. And in this particular case, I actually, I did the smart thing, and I put on the top without removing the rubber bands. But luckily, I was able to do it without having to break the rubber bands. That, again, is something that I probably should have thought of when I started putting this together. So back to stairs. Now, the stairs on this are on purpose a little janky because this is kind of a ramshackle setup here. So that none of the stairs are actually going to fit in a uniform manner, but they all fit together if you just kind of squish them in there. And as you can see there, the stairs are kind of like left, right, all over the place. Well, that to me looks to be on purpose, and I like the way it looks. One thing I have to say about this particular setup is they give you a lot of scatter. And I mean a lot. We're talking not just rock piles and a couple of little things. You get a lot of crates, big and small. You even get some tables that you can turn over. It's quite a bit. It's quite a lot. I actually spent a good amount of time just putting together all the crates. So that definitely says something about the extra space. So everywhere that there was extra space, you got rock scatter, or you got boards for scatter, just like broken boards and whatnot. You got crates and things like that. And I have to say, good on Blacksite Studios for utilizing that space. There was nothing on these sheets that was a waste of space. Some of them had areas that tell you, this sheet is this is sheet P, it's for this. There were others that just had extra pieces on them, extra crates, extra rock piles or whatnot. And I have to, hats off to these guys. They really did good with this kit. So I'm definitely ordering more from them in the future. So the doors themselves, this is the only piece that was a little weird. The door is kind of loose in that particular archway, but if you just put a little bit of glue around it, it should hold pretty well, because these door pieces are not meant to be open and closed. It's just kind of a decoration piece that you can put in the archways on buildings themselves. Now, I have not opted to glue the door into the archway, and you'll see how everything looks a little bit later. You don't necessarily have to glue down the doors or the trap doors or any of this, the excess stuff like that. You can just keep it on, keep it on the side and swap it around as you need to, which is probably what I'm going to end up doing, honestly. we go from wagons to corner pieces. Now each of these corner pieces has multiple layers. There's an outer layer, then there's an inner layer, and then there's the little piece that sits on top of the buildings. Now these can also be left off. I think that I may leave them off, quite honestly, and not glue them in so I can change them around, but we'll see how fiddly that becomes. And one thing I must say about this wagon, it was very easy to put together and it came off of the sprue without breaking. Unlike the Warcradle Scenics, the stable set that I got from the Gloomberg, unfortunately, as soon as I pulled that wagon off of the sprue, I mean, it broke mid-flight. Now, going back to the corner pieces here, I was just kind of finishing the assembly on the wagon. Going back to these corner pieces, just like the buildings, there are, as you can see, these are the multiple layers that I mentioned earlier. And what I did is I kind of measured it out, and then I put a little bit of glue in there, and all I did was give it a little squish and then stick the two pieces together. It was fairly easy, fairly simple. This corner window is kind of a neat addition. I really like the way it looks because it has that kind of I don't know what you call the window that has the peak on it. I'm sure there's a word for it out there. But just like the other wall pieces, there are several layers to this that you stick together. And there is two windows. Both of them are assembled on opposite directions, opposite sides here. So you can go in and put one on one side and one on the other. Now each of these little frames slots into the little piece here because it's a different color. And once again, I appreciate the little details in this kit because being able to add this extra piece and have it, put a little splash of color in each of these kits is really nice. It works out really well. The only thing about this particular piece is it was just a little fiddly to get straight, and it kept trying to move out. So what I ended up doing is putting a little bit of glue on the outside and then using my brush to a moist brush to kind of push the glue around and get it into the cracks and crevices there, so it would stay a little bit easier. And that step is unnecessary because if you are a little more patient, unlike what I was, you can actually just wait for the glue to dry and it'll be fine. I was just having a bout of impatience there. Now these wooden platforms, they go together fairly easily as well. There are two side ramps and then there's the one piece, and you just kind of balance the rest of the boards on top of it. It was really simple, really easy to put together, and I had no issues with the assembly on any of these either. The individual pieces fit really well, and there's a little gap there, as you can see, that you have to kind of measure out by hand. But this piece is supposed to be ramshackle, so it doesn't matter if it's a little bit off. Nobody's going to care. It just looks really good on the table itself. And there are quite a few of these individual pieces to put together. So here's me putting together wooden platforms. Yay! Alright, so I did have one bridge that had a piece that had been cut out by the laser, but it was easy enough for me to just get out my razor saw and my miter and just cut a couple of pieces and stick them in there. And honestly, you don't even really have to do that. You can just, put anything in there. These platforms are the ones that were on the last page. They're going to rework that particular page. This piece is supposed to set with only two supports, but what I did is I took the supports from sheet N and I used one of those supports to reinforce this area to make it a little more stable, because I didn't want it to, fall apart mid-game or whatnot. Not that I think it would. A little bit of PVA glue on the sides of those supports would probably keep it together pretty well. But I just wanted to mention that also. As you saw or will see here, don't use rubber bands on these supports, because they are too flimsy, and I almost broke an entire piece, and that would have been my dumb fault. But so don't use rubber bands on these. Alright, so this is why I wasn't worried about a couple of pieces being damaged by coming off the sprue, and or not worried about scraping those individual areas. What I'm doing here is I'm just taking just a brown Sharpie, and I'm just making a couple of lines here and there just to kind of blend everything in. But on each of these pieces where you can see the wood underneath the darker areas, the burn marks or whatnot, you just take that Sharpie and just color right over top of it, and that will kind of make everything uniform. This is the best example here, as you can see on the Watchtower. Once that Sharpie dries out, you pretty much, unless you really, really look at it, and it doesn't really matter because everything's ramshackle on this anyway, you pretty much won't see it from there on out. So that's, probably the easiest way to fix those gaps. Now, you could use probably some sort of brown primer, like a brush-on primer or whatnot, or you could use any color primer and then color right over top of it if you wanted to be more accurate. But honestly, this is quick, dirty, plain, simple, really easy. And you can even do it here on these edge pieces, as you can see, but you got to be careful not to mark up the individual bricks. Now the question is, how does it look on the table? And let me tell you, this is a 3x3 mat on a little side table that I have just for game playing, and it looks great. It looks really good. It fills out a table just about all the way with a little bit of space, and everything just kind of fits. Everything just kind of works, from the crates to the bridges to the ladders, all of the scatter pieces. And as you can see, I put the corners on the buildings there, but I have not glued them down yet. I'm not sure if I'm going to do that or not. So okay, we've seen it we've seen it on the table. So what does it look like with models added? Well, let's have some chunky Stormcast on there, and we'll see what it looks like. Honestly, it still looks good. Now, these models are big. The Stormcast are giant in the first place, especially in Drosta here. So the bases, they take up a lot of space, but honestly, it still looks good. And to tell you the truth, if you were to play Mordheim on this stuff, it would fit just fine. It would be grand. This is everything set up with a couple of my Warcradle buildings as well, just to kind of fill it out. Anyway, so as you've seen here, this terrain is amazing. It's great, and it works, and I love it. And Blacksite, you did a really good job. Anyway, feel free to like and subscribe. Join me on Patreon and Discord, and thank you all for watching. I really appreciate it.